and Economic Development Committee. What is the name? October 12th, John Weddleton.
Big training.
Two Peterson. Egypts.
Fairview Clerk's Office.
Forrest Dunbar.
Let's go around the room, we'll say hello.
Emily Cohn with Anchorage Community Land Trust.
Daniel George, Mountain View Community Council.
Dave Dietrich with Anchorage Community Land Trust.
Ross Knopflinger, acting building official.
Rebecca Carroll, Municipality On-Site Water Wastewater.
Christine Bennell, Long Range Planning, and the planner for the Fairview neighborhood area.
Alan Copeland, Fairview Community Council.
Veronica Krishna, Anchorage Community Land Trust.
Stewart with the Land Trust as well.
Kirk Rose.
Carol Wong, Long Range Planning. Caitlin Taylor, ECA.
John Cecil, Long Range Planning, and the planner with Mountain View.
Okay, thanks everyone. We have two things on the agenda. One is a quick look at the septic system changes, and then kind of discussion on how to keep neighborhood plans from just gathering dust on a shelf, basically. And the septic stuff, if you guys want to sit up here, you can go through it.
These are copies.
This is
Just wanted to go around.
So I guess if you could give us a rundown, why you did it, what you've done, what the response has been, and then we'll figure out, I mean, it's slated for 10, our next meeting, we'll go for public hearings.
The 24th is us.
Right.
So, and I think just my idea is, I want to get a sense for if it's controversial, your timing, could we delay it a couple of weeks, like maybe council's getting close or whatever, just get some sense if it's gonna, but if it's already done, there's not much controversy.
John, before we get, I just want to know, can you tell me what your outreach has been to the community councils? Have you guys been going to community council meetings, or I want to make sure they've been involved in this before we hear about it on the 24th.
No, we have not been meeting with community councils.
Thank you.
What has been the I mean, you're doing this, so there's some standard notification.
I guess the process was started from what I've heard about 10 years ago. And it's gone through various iterations of, I think, kind of coming to completion, but then getting retracted and just working with various different groups. So I think the most current process, or the process that brought us to where we are today, was going through the on-site tech review board and then industry professionals. And I think all of our meetings were public, and so those were always advertised. So people were invited to attend any of our discussion meetings. But, and I don't remember how many years that particular process has been going on.
Probably close to 10 years.
Okay, so that
whole
was-
time, yeah.
So many septic tanks that rusted through and everything else. Okay, I guess we just went through then why it was done, what was needed, what you did. Just really brief.
I don't have a lot of the history of why it was originally discussed to start. I mean, I know they did kind of a big overhaul of, like if you read our current wastewater code, it's very hard to follow. Like there's sections that kind of don't fit in with, they're just like parceled and pieced out throughout the code. So I know there was definitely a big effort to just get everything in a better order within the code. So I don't know if that was originally the main intent.
Yeah, I guess it started so long that we probably lost track of the impetus, But I think it was probably to a large degree industry driven to provide clarification to issues, a lot of the issues that the municipality and industry worked through, through the years. And industry, and by industry I mean the engineers who design and certify septic systems and who apply for certificates of on-site systems approval, and the excavators and even the pumpers. They've been involved in this rewrite process extensively over the years, but it's been like a very collaborative process between the on-site department and the industry to come up with a code that works for everyone. I think that's probably the prime goal.
Okay. sent a long list, just as I went through, and I'm not bashful about it. You know, so I appreciate, I mean, some things I just missed, you know, so this is very helpful. So I don't know if we really have to go through this so much, but you had, maybe go through, you had your document with the highlights of the changes, you go through that.
The summary of significant changes.
Right.
I mean, do you want us to go over the ones we think are the biggest, or do you want me to just start going through?
I think we should focus on.
The bigger one?
On what we perceive to be the most significant changes.
I think that would be good. You also had a couple that were, Hillside District Plan recommended, a number of things you rejected. There were a couple where you said, well, if you want this, here would be the words we needed. I guess a sense there was there, so you had a lot of debate on the committee perhaps on those things.
Well, we can discuss that too.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, we
We
can
do.
kind of discuss why we ended up where we did on that.
Basically, then we'll know what might blow up at the public hearing, and just be warned of it, and, you know, if it is, we maybe want to wait for the process, potentially.
So probably the engineered receiving soil would be a good spot to start. That is probably arguably the most controversial thing in the new code. Engineered receiving soil is going to allow certain properties that currently cannot be developed with on-site wastewater disposal systems to be developed by basically bringing a certain amount of material onto the property to build it up, to allow for the installation of a drain field.
To give the separation to groundwater for impermeables.
Mm-hmm.
So if it doesn't perk properly now, they can bring in dirt that works, presumably.
Yeah.
They provide the treatment.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's controversial because,
Well, it's spendy, but if you own, property up in Bear Valley that currently can't be developed, it's gonna allow that property potentially to be developed. Maybe not in all cases, but.
John, what's the impact if you bring fill in to the next property next to it? You guys looked at what the impact would be if you change the landform by bringing fill in?
Yeah.
So, it would actually just be underneath the bed itself. So whether it's, a 5 wide or a bed, it's gonna be just confined to that area. So it's not really, I don't think it's gonna fall under fill and grade, unless it
Yeah.
got really, unless it was a really, really big bed, but.
Municipal code already addresses that one cannot change the drainage on their property to the point where it's going to negatively impact adjacent properties. That's pretty well covered already in municipal code, and we don't anticipate that's going to be a problem under this engineered fill scenario, because the engineered fill would be isolated and would have to be far enough away from property lines.
That wouldn't impact it?
Be correct.
Do you have community council to represent that area, John? Which one here?
Diane is here for Rabbit Creek, and I know Bear Valley first talked about it last night, but at that point it's not on there, summary significant changes.
Page 3.
Am I missing? Oh, it's on the back. Oh, there we go. So, okay. Is this done other cities?
Not that I'm aware, and this one was largely industry driven, and so I think why you were saying it could be controversial is, or why it could be perceived as controversial is, yeah, it's not, I'm not sure it is a proven method.
Admittedly, it's going to be a bit of an experiment. We're confident enough that we think it's going to work. That staff, the department is not fighting it. This was something really proposed by the engineering community.
John, since we've been working on this for 10 years approximately, is there a time factor on this? Because we could find out we got a big problem on the 24th. I just want to know, does this have to be done now? Or can we still delay it to another meeting if we have to?
No, it could obviously be delayed a meeting or two. There's no great urgency here.
I think that's all I wanted to put on.
And for construction season, people coming and getting systems permitted now for next season, so if we waited.
There's a bit of a mad rush to permit systems now to get systems done before things freeze up too much.
Oh, you got them done.
Yeah, people aren't looking ahead far enough to permit for next year.
Okay.
Yeah, and generally on the residential side of things, they don't look ahead that far.
And I don't,
Yeah.
even if somebody was to get a permit at the end of this season and not build until next season, I don't think there's too much in our code that would make, like, so say if they had to get a renewal, I don't think there's much in our code that's changing that would then make their permit not okay. It's just, the code's almost gonna allow more things, for future permits, I guess.
Okay. And not to say this work is bad, it's just sometimes people will oppose things because they just didn't know.
Mhm.
And once they see it's not rushed, they're more comfortable. So we might do that. I think there's one risk if we do it, there is some confusion because we have to DPM the drainage changes on November 7th. If we postpone it 2 weeks, people get all that muddled up in their minds, even I do it, we grabbed the wrong one, but those are very, very different.
My only concern is if you want to delay, just let us know and we'll factor it into it.
I think we might consider that if Amy's not the parking lot, because in Eagle River's got huge amount. Where is there?
There's a lot of
There's
there's
well,
other
septic
settings
is
out
almost
there.
all the way out Eagle River Road, right?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, the offset system regulates well and septic systems from including a GERD.
Right. And they're all over town.
Mhm.
So there was an issue on grandfathering. So if Dan's got a traditional system with a sliver valve between two drain fields, and if that valve goes bad, does she have to do the whole system, change the whole system, or does she have to change?
So if just the valve went bad, that can get repaired without a permit, so they can just go in and replace the valve, installer can just replace the valve without even going through onsite.
I can't hear John, can I speak to that?
Sure.
Gotta speak up, I'm old.
Let's never stop you before that.
No, that's
Mr. Dean.
a valve that splits to individual, the different drain fields is plastic. It breaks easily. I don't wanna have to upgrade the whole system just because every 10 years when I switch, it might break. And are there any septic construction engineers here? There should be. And some of the old ones, really, there's just a little bubble and they break. And we are advised to move that switch every year or two just to keep it loose. And I hope to do that, but not everyone asks their pumper dumper to do that when they pump. Or not everyone has a 10-foot key, metal key to do that. So I wanna make sure, that according to the code, I have to upgrade if that switch breaks.
Where's that in the code?
I think it's in there, because I read it somewhere, right? John, you sent it to me.
Well, my reading of it is if that breaks, you have to replace the valve with an approved valve. But only, it talks about the component, not the system.
Right.
Am I right on that?
Right.
Correct.
That wasn't clear to me.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look, 'cause I know, I think, I don't remember exactly where we stated, since I'm still using the current code, I haven't quite got familiar with where everything is in the new one yet. I know that in the, actually, maybe it's just right here.
I would say whether it's clear or not in the code, the department would not require you upgrade your complete septic system just because the valve failed.
Yeah, and I thought at least in the current code, it was pretty clear that if it's not the tank or the drain field, you don't even have to, like, permit it with us to get that fixed.
Yeah, that's just to repair the valve, we wouldn't even know about it.
Mhm.
I would definitely recommend some clarification. And would my engineer be required to get a permit, or would he?
You wouldn't even need to involve an engineer. You just one of these maintenance companies could fix it.
It requires digging up.
Yeah, I wouldn't require an engineer just because they're digging a hole.
Okay, so engineered soil's a big deal. Like grandfather and crystal clear. What were some other things? And actually, just to catch up, we were just kind of hitting some highlights on this. Did you have any feedback from Eagle River folks, or are they aware of it?
Yeah, I haven't heard any feedback from the Eagle River Advisory Board. So I'm not sure. Usually the way Debbie works is only if two councils want to talk about it, they talk about it. So I haven't had any feedback.
Because they don't know, or because they're
No, they know. They know. I just haven't seen anybody that has been overly concerned about it.
There's a minutes we reflect the
I'm sorry, can I go back just a second? Ms. Holmes gave me some comments. Are these for the record? This meeting?
It's what I was going to speak to if the public was going to be allowed to speak.
Oh, is there more on there?
I had 5 points.
Yes, this is the record counting.
It was mainly for you.
Reflect the meeting joined us.
Okay.
For the tape recorder, Amy Demboski has joined us.
I'm sorry, I was late. I couldn't end the phone call I was on. I tried desperately, but it was unavoidable.
Okay, other big issues.
So I think the other ones that could be, with the advanced wastewater treatment systems, we're proposing reduced separations. So like a conventional system has the 100-foot separation between well and septic, 4 feet between groundwater and the bottom of the drain field, 6 feet between bottom of bed or bottom of drain field and impermeables. With the advanced wastewater treatment systems, we're proposing kind of, I guess, half of that. So 50 feet between well and septic system, including both the tank and its components and the associated drain field. All of those would have a 50-foot separation. And then I believe it was 4 feet to impermeables and 2 feet to groundwater. And it's just based on the higher effluent quality that's coming out of those systems.
Reductions have been granted in the past. We just required that people kind of went through a somewhat cumbersome waiver process. And that waiver process costs money. And so we basically said this waiver process is a waste of time and money. So let's just codify what we're doing.
You can go first, John.
We have, throughout the hillside, some R7 lots that are outside of the wastewater system, Maples area. So they have well, but they're 20,000 square feet or so. Some are less. They have well and septic now. What do you do in those cases? So they have a lot of, how big are lots?
Mm-hmm.
They need well and septic.
If they're oriented such that they can't meet the 100-foot separations, because even if they're 20,000 they're really long, then it's possible they can still meet that. If everyone plans that the wells go on one side and the septics go on the other side. If they can't, I mean, those are probably the cases where we assess them on a case-by-case basis, and they have to ask for a waiver, and they likely have an advanced wastewater treatment system that part of the justification is the higher effluent quality when they go for those waivers.
Can you say no?
We can, but we have to have a really good reason, I think is how our code reads. Like if we ever rejected a waiver request, I mean, we have to have, we can ask, normally what happens is we just ask for additional justifications. Like if we're not satisfied with what the engineer provides for their waiver request, we usually just work with them to provide some better explanation of why we should feel comfortable granting the waiver.
Would you require an advanced system?
I think in the future, if this is granted, and I'm not sure we're gonna grant 50-foot separations to conventional anymore.
Well, that might be part of the approval, is if you can't meet the separation with the conventional system, go to an advanced system, These are just the various things that we look into, or that engineers propose.
Yeah, it'd be a shame to have undevelopable lots, if there's a system that can work. Okay, Ford?
Yeah, 2 things. Actually, the timing's really good. To start out with this was your, these were your comments, right, John?
Yeah.
So, are these, I guess, to the staff, are these going to be? So there's some deletions in here, for example. Are these going to be incorporated an S version, or have they already been incorporated, or do we need to actually amend this on Tuesday? Because I see one here, John, for example, where you talk about deleting the language, assembly shall not adopt amendment or regulation. And that to me, that makes a lot of sense to me. You know, we don't typically find ourselves in that way. We could always waive that. So to me, it makes sense to take out that language. Will it be taken out by Tuesday?
You know, I don't know. I mean, a lot of this is just me reading and having questions. You want to be better informed. That was more of a warning to them, because like in my year and a half in assembly, I see that we do that. You know, we don't like what you told us to do. We say, notwithstanding what you told us to do, we're going to do this anyway. So we can leave it in or not. I think basically it ends up the same thing. I mean, I do think it is good going to these boards. You have experts on there. We're not experts. And I think our discussion yesterday about the Public Safety Commission, why didn't we send this whole SB 91 thing to them first? You know, I mean, we had a timeline, but, you know, so in my thinking, I want to rely more on those boards as we go forward. So I don't think it's bad. I think it's a very good thing to have these go to this board. And I know some of the people on it, smart people who read the stuff and know what's actually on the board. So I'm comfortable with sending it there. I didn't want to give the impression it wasn't. It's just a warning to you.
Okay.
It doesn't always have to happen. So this was not at that level for the proposal.
The other point I was going to make was on behalf of the constituent, but he just arrived. So Gary, do you want to come up and say your piece, or explain what you're asking about? So I believe that we've sent you. This is Gary Solon. He emailed me about wanting to change this ordinance related to wells, and I sent it through Chris Schutte, and I thought he said he communicated it to you. Okay. So it's not a surprise. So could you answer?
Yep. My name is Gary Solon. I'm a registered civil engineer, small-time user of the on-site services section. I'm an engineer. I'm not a lawyer, but I do like consistent language. And there's two reasons. Right now, the proposed code is adding an exemption, or another reason for an exemption not to receive a COSA to the wastewater code, and it's adding 5 words, or to a family trust. Right now, it's just between spouses. So as this 8-year process, or approximately 8-year process of adopting new code for the wastewater code 1565 is going through, I was looking one day, just seeing what the new code would offer, and I saw that. And then there's 2 reasons why I'm sort of offering this amendment. One is I want consistency between the 2 codes, between the wastewater code and the water well code. So the wastewater code would be adopted, but in the water well code, it's still just going to say for a spouse. So I'm thinking that this or to a family trust needs to be added now rather than wait for the process of, you know, how long it's going to take for the water well code to be changed and adopted. And the other reason is I have a duplex over here, which is probably the more important reason to me, near Piper and East 40th. That is one of those situations. I'm on city sewer, but I have a well. So I bought it in 1980. It's only in my name. I'm married now, and I'd like to transfer it to a family trust. I know I dropped it off a couple weeks ago to you guys.
So that language was added to the code because we were actually codifying the practice we were doing.
To the wastewater code.
Yeah, so we were already doing that. Okay.
Right.
And so we thought, all right, we better codify it just to make sure it's clear for everybody. So obviously we would do it for a well only.
Right.
However, you know, if you are going to do an S version, you could obviously choose to update the well water code to be consistent too.
It's just one, you know, there may be some other sections I haven't looked at it that close that don't quite agree. So.
Yeah, our intent is to jump into the well code next, and we were going to like touch up all the fine little details then. It's not going to take 8 years. There's reasons that it took 8 years, and it had to do with, you know, kind of like changing who the wastewater section reported to and blah, blah, blah. But I won't get into all those details, but it would probably be more like a 1-year process.
Can I ask a quick follow-up, John? So, you know, what he's asking for, it appears to me, and I admit to not being an expert on this subject, but it seems like a fairly small change to codify something we're already doing. If that's the case, and this is a question for you, Dean, could we put an amendment into this as a wastewater ordinance that deals with wells without, sort of violating this single subject rule? Is it sufficiently close that we could do that so we wouldn't have to wait a year without? It doesn't seem like it would hamper or harm this ordinance. So you're not opposed to it. The question then is really just a legal one. Would it violate the single subject rule?
I need to look at it closely.
Okay.
I'm not worried enough. I'm hoping to make arguments right now.
Well, looking at the title and looking at the concept, if we're dealing with wastewater, we're dealing with wastewater. If we start commingling wells, I think it could get a little. I don't personally. I mean, I think what he brings up is a valid point. I just I don't see it to be an emergency why we have to shove it into the wastewater ordinance. Especially
Yeah,
because
I
that's
guess-
the deal with it.
I guess we need to wait, let Dean look at that more closely, and then we'll just do a year. We'll schedule that meeting, we schedule that meeting for next
Well,
week.
I could also do a freestanding ordinance that would be much faster, that would just deal with that one topic of staffing as opposed to it. But I admit to not being expert on wastewater or wells, so I don't want to muddle with something that is highly technical you guys are working on.
Okay, we're gonna run into our other topics. There were, hillside district plan, one was, there were a number of recommendations. And I was really involved with that. I know a lot of this, the consultant kind of had, here's the best practices way up high, and there's a lot of debate at that time about it, lots from up here. This one, the 24-inch diameter riser is considered a best practice, but it's not zoning supported, so you did not. Was that contentious, or is that your preference?
So I guess a little bit of the history here is, again, I think this, with changing of hands, the history was lost a little bit. So I think our current staff, we're not really sure exactly who these responses initially had gone through, whether it was just through industry or if it ever was taken to the tech review board. When we went to prepare the ordinance documents, we found these and it was like, well, we're not gonna not address these. But at that point, it was like, it's a new staff, a new group of staff, and we didn't want to just issue what was previously responded to with somebody else's thoughts. So we took another look at it, and so this is current staff's thoughts. Some of them I don't think we changed hardly at all, but the two main ones that pertain to tanks, I believe the previous responses were a little bit more skewed towards not wanting to adopt them based on cost to homeowner. We still thought that it was important to identify the fact that they are good recommendations. Yes, they could increase the cost to homeowners, but that doesn't make it a non-valid recommendation. And so we did agree with providing either better coatings for steel tanks or, well, I guess the recommendation was a better coating for steel tanks. We just pointed out the fact that there are other materials available. And then the other one was the 24-inch access for better maintenance. So because it hadn't gone through, I guess, all the groups, that's why we didn't incorporate it into code. It was more
Well, the hillside district plan we had, there was a consultant, and he came and he did like a best practices thing, so I recollect.
Yeah.
He did not go through the process. His recommendations didn't go through the super careful, but there was a lot of public feedback and well pumpers and septic system designers and software involved. But if this, am I correct on that, Dan?
I couldn't hear everything you said, that they weren't recommended, right? They weren't adopted.
No, that's what we're doing here, as far as making it code. They were discussed, but not as extensive as I'm sure. But the coded tank, so you told me that pretty much people are going with regular uncoated steel tanks standard.
They're coated. They have the coal tar pitch.
Okay, so that is standard to get that, and a recommendation could be a better coating than the last 50 years instead of 10 to 20. And that's $2,000 more.
Correct.
And that's the STIP, STIP coating.
Yeah, I mean, that's the recognized name that people use an epoxy coating.
So I don't know, anybody have anything else?
And I think just, I mean, if you read through our response, I mean, the STIP coating would add, I think it doubles the cost of a steel tank. But I think what we're trying to point out also is that there are other materials available, and some of those will be about the same cost as the STIP coated steel tank, but there's also options that are like currently cheaper than the coal tar pitch coated. And to be honest, we don't know why people don't use them more often. We still get mostly steel tanks being installed, but there's burial depth limitations, but most of our burial depths meet that. So for whatever reason, you know, industry's not pushing the plastic tanks, but they're available.
And it appears like we're behind pretty much the rest of the nation in regards to this tank issue. You know, most, if not all jurisdictions probably wouldn't allow the steel tank with the quality of coating that's allowed within the municipality.
We live in our homes for 5 years, that's the plan, right?
Yeah.
You know, it could be $0,5.
So I reached out, just double checked with Debbie. I think she had to go over advisory boards planning on discussing this in the next week, is my understanding. So they're a little late in the game. But my question to staff is, have we had discussions with industry about impacts or any concerns or any comments or maybe potential areas of improvement?
So industry was involved extensively through this whole rewrite. By industry, I mean the engineers and the excavators, and even the pumpers were involved about 5 to 6 years ago. Yeah.
I assume so. I just wanted to make sure. And I have one of those advanced systems. And I've had it for like 15, 18 years. But that's so I know exactly.
Okay, right, and now, I mean, another big thing is they weren't allowed a 25% slope for septic systems, and now we have a system doing that you're comfortable will work.
Again, that was the codified proposed methods that they have to prove in order to allow the steeper slope installs. Again, that was probably largely industry driven. And again, I say industry driven, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, they're the guys that are out there designing these and installing these all the time. I think they just kind of pushed for it because they kind of identified that, again, we do allow installs on steep slopes with waivers, and they have to demonstrate enough justification to us to make us feel comfortable that it's not going to daylight. So again, this was kind of codifying something in a process that we would follow in order to allow these without going through the waiver process. But I think they just kind of, based on their feedback, they just rarely see daylighting effluent if it's installed correctly.
So it's not really new, because I look at it, particularly Eagle River, left side Eagle River Road, it's not that steep.
Yeah.
And there's homes there, well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically we codified a more cumbersome waiver process.
We have a significant amount of the property, actually. When you're talking about steep slopes, I would eventually guess Eagle Valley and Highland probably have the most amount in Eagle Valley.
Okay. We need to move on pretty quick. Do you want to go through your other 4 points really quick, and then we'll...
I still am not quite sure why this is coming up now, but you can tell me that later. I just wonder if it's industry driven and what they want. I want to make it clear that the Hillside District Plan's white papers that were mentioned in some of the documents were not adopted. They cannot be used. There's a lot of flaws in them. Some of the recommendations that you chose to not incorporate were dealing with cost, but you left off the most logical reasons not to adopt it. And that is such as the 24-inch manhole cover. You can't see anything better in 24 inches than you can in a small one because it's black and slimy. You ever looked in one of those? And also, it's dangerous for children, in my estimation. 24 inches, it's too big.
Just to make clear, so that was not recommended, is that
Right.
The 24-inch was not recommended, it's required.
We agreed with the recommendation. It's not incorporated. So staff did agree with that recommendation as a better way to maintain a tank.
But you didn't put it through.
No.
It's the reasons that I would like you to understand where I'm coming from. Cost, if it was a health hazard, they should be adopted. But you said it was all cost. But I'm talking about other more logical reasons that doesn't seem to be part of this discussion. You've already answered about my plastic switch. And I am very concerned about these steep slope changes. That's a big red flag for me. I really would like to see this be a kind of a sunset maybe clause or something on it, because I have seen too many examples on the hillside where I would really be afraid to have one of the septic system. Anyway, I appreciate it.
Okay, all right, thanks, Dan. Okay, any thoughts on? Maybe would you, if we postpone this for 2 more weeks?
That would
to
be
give them a
huge,
chance to look at
because
it?
Debbie, when I reached back out to her, just to verify for sure, all of a sudden, my phone just started blowing up. So, that would be really, really actually helpful if the administration doesn't mind to do it.
Okay, I don't think that was an issue, so let's look to that, because I just sent it out to community councils. If there's no rush, I don't want to rush it.
I appreciate that.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. Appreciate all the work on this.
Okay, thank you.
Nobody's ever had a septic problem.
So, John,
We dug it. We dug it, this whole swipe the bottom of the septic system. So I had to put a metal tank in there. Also, I got work right for years.
John, are we gonna run 2 weeks, just a 2-week postponement?
You want to do that here or just bring it up in the meeting?
I'm gonna bring it up to the meeting.
Is that okay? I'm just gonna tell her her timeline.
Well, I think we'd recommend that another 2 weeks.
I think so.
Yeah, it's only a couple weeks.
I'll make sure we get it right, people know about it.
Right.
Okay, thanks. So next is neighborhood plans check-in. Who wants to talk to us about that? Kirk or Radhika?
Yeah, I'll
We
get
have
there.
seats here. If anyone who wants to talk a lot wants to move up.
Who's doing it?
And I brought copies of the plan if anyone wants one.
We have a copy of it.
And there's a one-page handout that we brought.
Yeah, that's true.
Hours ago. Ellen, do you want to come join us, or do you want to hide back there?
Yep.
There's a seat right next to me.
Ellen, come on up front.
Come on up.
Come on down.
I'm not with the Mountain View, I'm with Fairview, so.
Well, when we get to Fairview tonight, just come on up and join us.
Okay.
I don't bite, I promise.
Don't believe that, Ellen.
Okay.
Sure. So
Kirk wanted to have this be, so, and it's important, you know, I would just say from my view, I was very, very involved in the Hillside District Plan over 10 years ago, and we were worried, this goes on the shelf and ignored, and it was not ignored because community councils and Hillside Home and Landowners Organizations said we will keep this alive. You can see our discussions when we get started to this, it's still there, it's still alive, so I think it's very important to make sure they remain part of our process. So tell us how we're gonna do that.
Sure.
Is that why we're here?
More than that,
thank you,
Mr.
everyone,
Chair.
for inviting Mountain Community Council, Fairview Community Council, through Anchorage Community Land Trust to present to you this morning. My name is Daniel George. I've served on the Mountain Community Council for going on my 6th year. I'm currently the treasurer.
I'm Radhika Krishna. I work for the Anchorage Community Land Trust, and in 2012 we were charged by the council with the creation of the Mountain View Neighborhood Plan. So we've helped the council shepherd the plan through the public process, the adoption process. We're a nonprofit that works on neighborhood revitalization of Mountain View, and actually recently, as of this year, in Fairview too. So we're very glad to be here. I want to let Jasmine introduce herself.
And I'm Jasmine, and I'm on the Community Council. I'm the president, and I'm proud Mountain View resident.
So, to the chair's point, we appreciate the opportunity to take the plan off the shelf, dust it off a little bit, pat ourselves on the back a little bit, because it was a pretty big accomplishment, you know, for these two neighborhoods to come to this point. My understanding is that Mountain View will present first, and we'll have Fairview, if that's all right. Sure. On that. So last September, the Assembly finally adopted and gave its final blessing on the Mountain View Targeted Neighborhood Plan, which is about a 4-year process. It's a moment of great pride for our neighborhood, and it's now important we hold ourselves accountable. So that's part of what we're doing this morning. We're dusting off the plan, taking it off the shelf. We'll talk a little bit about, I'll hit on some points that we've been able to work on in the last year, and then we will talk some more about some of our future needs, how the plan looks going forward. And we've been in discussions with Fairview as well. Their plan is a little different than ours, but they both have the same goals, advancing the needs and the goals of the neighborhood.
So I'll just start off with a quick recap of the plan itself. I know you heard a lot about this during the adoption process and when it went to Planning and Zoning Commission. But we're really proud of our plan because it was a huge amount of public input and engagement. We engaged about 1,000 residents in our neighborhood over the course of 4 years, and in Mountain View that's not necessarily easy because people don't come to public meetings about neighborhood plans. We stood at the library, we went to the Red Apple, we interviewed Clark Middle School students and supportive housing residents. But this all really kicked off in 2012 with when the council charged the land trust with the creation of a plan. The first thing we did was hold a community summit where 150 Mountain View residents came together, and they spent 2 days talking about their goals and action items, and that really turned into the implementation matrix in the plan. That's where we came up with those action items and goals, and we did refine them through the rest of the public process, but everything in our plan, all of the content, was not created by who you see up here. It was created by our residents. And that's why our plan's a little bit different than some of the other neighborhood plans you might have, even Fairview's and Government Hills, because it really didn't end up being a lot about land use, because that's not what we heard from residents. In our neighborhood, the issues that came up were really more tied to infrastructure and services. People wanted to talk to us about bus service so that they could get to their jobs. They wanted to talk to us about public safety and having the APD CAP team in the neighborhood. And so those were the issues that we heard, and those are the goals that you'll see reflected in our plan. Just to cover real quickly before we start talking about what's been accomplished, the top 5 priorities that people were excited about and that are reflected in our plan on page 52, if you're looking, are 1, improving Davis Park, which is our largest park in the neighborhood, and it's actually owned by J Bear. So that represents some challenges. We just went through a process this last year where we had to advocate for the renewal of the lease so that improvements could even happen on that land, which we did, thanks very much to our congressional delegation. The second priority is adding the Mountain View's pedestrian amenities. We've got new street lighting that should come online in the next month in the neighborhood, but That's only one portion of the commercial corridor. 3 is adding new bus routes serving Mountain View, and we will actually on the 23rd have the new people mover system happen. Number 4 is paving the alleys. And we have had some alley paving happen this last year too, but right now we've paved about 40% of the alleys in the neighborhood. And number 5 is redevelopment of blighted and vacant properties. So we're really happy to see that all of these priorities have moved forward over the last few years, really since we started the planning process. And some of that I think was just, even before the plan was adopted, having something on paper and being able to take it around and talk to people about it was really helpful. But those are the priorities, and I'll turn it over to Daniel.
Thank you. I can rattle all that off from memory. I probably have to look at my notes a few times. So talking about what we've accomplished over the last year, certainly getting the lease agreement made possible for long-term securing Davis Park was big for us. That is a huge community asset. It's not just a Mountain View asset, it's a destination asset for folks on the Center Highway. And I'm happy to pause at any point for questions.
I just want to ask one question relative to Davis Park. Sure. Are you guys coming forward with any bonds now that we do technically own that long-term lease? Because before we could not bond for projects in there, but now we can. You guys coming forward with any bond issues?
So my understanding through the chair is that $150,000 was included in the last bond for amenities in Davis Park, and that improvement was supposed to happen this year, but because of the timing of signing the lease, the negotiation with Junior and the city, and just the construction timeline of the year, that improvement hasn't been built yet this summer. And for a little more information, Rapid Christian actually has talked with the Parks Foundation and the Public Investment Fund to those points.
So we on track to spend $150,000?
Yeah, next year. They were supposed to do some work using the Youth Employment Parks crews this summer, but even after the lease passed, they had to get written permission from JBER to make improvements, and JBER didn't get that written permission to the city in time to actually do anything this summer. So I think that's just something that we hopefully don't see again, but because there are multiple entities that have to sign off on any small improvement, and this was a disc golf course that was going to be built with volunteer labor, which is not a big project. We do want to see that, a smoother timeline in the future for any future capital improvements. And also, only that $150,000 that was bonded is a great first step, but a whole Davis Park master plan was passed last year, and I have not gotten the total number for how much it will cost to implement fully, but it will be far more than $150,000. So we haven't seen another future funding proposed for any future bonds, but we know that will be a need, and so we wanted to make sure that that's still, being expressed to everyone as there will be future funding needs in Davis Park beyond this $150,000.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. And I would just like to reiterate that as I go down some of the capital projects that we've had over the last few years, sources have, by the most part, been through the state capital budget, and we don't anticipate that to be availability in the near future. But we do hope to see progress on the Davis Park master plan and the Mountain View target improvement plan, and the most likely funding source available for future bonding. It's been a while since we really had some bonding for Mountain View, and so that might be something that is something to consider going forward as a development package of the budget chair. So we've had there was a state capital grant about 5 or 6 years ago for Mountain View Drive and Cary Street. Senator Will Kowski was our senator, but actually probably about 6 or 7 years ago. Secured about $1.1 million. The preferred design that came out of the process was a roundabout. However, the project was only about 40% funded, so what ended up happening is they ended up just putting a raised median and a crosswalk. Construction is just now taking place. Paving for alleyways was a $250,000 capital grant about 3 years ago. That money did more than 10 alleyways. I think it was about $20,000 per alley paved, which is a remarkable cost efficiency. And it was so successful that I believe that street maintenance is continuing to pave 1 or 2 alleys this summer as well out of their existing funds. There's a lot of reasons why that actually saves the city money, and I'd be happy to talk about that a little bit if folks are interested. Simply just not having to grade the alleys is the most obvious reason.
We put money on the bond last year for that too, for the whole city. That's targeted out.
More in the budget for next year.
Put the next 300,000 for alley paving.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe there's money in the
budget for next year as it's been submitted at this point by the mayor to pay some additional hours.
We really appreciate that. We've also received $1 million capital award in 2013, I believe it was, for pedestrian lighting. This was phase 3 or 4 of a project that went from the Glen Highway and Mountain View Drive intersection of Airport Heights, all the way down Mountain View Drive and then all the way to Boniface. This $1 million award was for the section of essentially commercial drive on Mountain View Drive to Boniface. That $1 million was not sufficient to create the density that we need or to mirror the density that already exists on Mountain View Drive. I drove through it last night just to kind of get a ballpark. I think it was 21 lights that I counted, which is pretty expensive for $1 million. It's the exact same infrastructure that's been in there before, so we know there's going to be an additional infrastructure needed to make the rest of that corridor safe and match the aesthetics and all kinds of things for that project. Pedestrian safety is one of our biggest issues. In the plan itself, there's a map showing the pedestrian bicycle collisions, and there are more than 2,000 in 2012 alone, which is the year that the data was available for. So pedestrian safety continues to be a high priority in council, and pedestrian lighting is one of the ways that we'd like to see that addressed. We talked about bonding. Blighted property acquisition and repurposing, we've seen close to $1 million in state capital funding for that purpose over the last 7 or 8 years, perhaps even more. But that money has by and large dried up from the state. There are still unused commercial lots on the thoroughfare in Mountain View Drive. Our ultimate goal is employment for people in the neighborhood and to create a sense of place and a sense of community. And we've also seen art installations, we've seen signage. We appreciate the municipality of Anchorage updating the signs at two of the gateway entrances to the neighborhood, celebrating our neighborhood's diversity. Maybe you've seen some stories about that. We'd like to maybe see one out for Gaw and Mountain View Drive area of the main entrance. And at that point, I think maybe I'll turn it over to Jasmine to talk about some of our future needs as well.
So I'm the incoming president, so it's good to work with Daniel and Radica because they have a strong sense of where the council has been, where the community has been, what they've already stated as priorities and needs in specific areas. So I'm just going to touch briefly on the things that we discussed moving forward, and you guys can jump in at any time. So of course, to finish funding those projects that we already have in place, some of the other things that we discussed as a priority for our neighborhood is just continuing our resident empowerment, and we discussed it at our last executive committee meeting. Is we've done a really good job about engaging, our community in terms of what do you want Mountain View to look like? What does that look like to you that'll make you enjoy living there and want to continue living there? An area that we really want to expand on is re-engaging more of our residents in the council process and how the councils work. So we do a good job at getting feedback and just saying, what does Mountain View look like to you? Now we're going that extra step and just re-engaging. How does the council work? What's the lingo that we use? Once you've identified what you want to see in your neighborhood, how do you bring that to the council and then bring it to the next steps after the council to get the action that you're looking for? So that's something that we've talked about is re-engaging our residents. Another big area, and I'm glad Mr. Dave is here. So talking about, I don't think talk for yourself, but we love you. Is supporting Boys and Girls Club. As you guys know, that's at the epicenter in our neighborhood. I live right across the street from the Boys and Girls Club. I see kids coming and going all the time, coming and going from school, activities, field trips. So we want to also just say that that's still important. That's a huge place. They serve a high number of kids, and we joke in the neighborhood that Mr. Dave and Mr. C is everybody's dad or everybody's uncle because all the kids just love them. And if you ever see them working, it's impressive how they manage that many kids. I have 2, and I don't know how you guys do it every day. So I think that's still important to the youth. The adults as well, they're also very supportive of that being a meeting space. That's where we have our council meetings at. So we did want to just kind of stress the importance of really supporting that building with 9-Star downstairs, Boys and Girls Club upstairs, and what that means to us as a neighborhood.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry, just to interrupt briefly. Who owns that building?
The city does.
The city owns it.
Okay, great. So we're not, the Boys and Girls Club in our district, we pay the lease and we don't own the building, so I'm glad to hear that.
It's the Mountain View Community Center, and there's a 20-year lease with the Boys and Girls Club, and I believe that lease will be renewed for the first time in 20 years next spring.
And is it a zero cost or relatively low cost lease, or what's that's it?
I wish I could answer that, but that's my understanding. I don't know the details.
There has been significant state capital infrastructure in the building, I think close to $1 million over the last decade or so, of actual improvements provided by the state. However, I don't know that the city has bonded for anything, or done any infrastructure improvements there, to my knowledge, in that time. The building is roughly 20 years old in this now, so that might be something to consider is both operations as well as capital improvements in that center. Thanks.
And the only other two things that we really touch on that's important to us again is, of course, always community safety. And we're very happy with the foot patrols from APD coming into the neighborhood. They're making a good presence, so it's nice to see them walking around. Kids start to know them, seeing at the Boys and Girls Club as well. We're still doing our patrol. We have our patrol vehicle that does our neighborhood, and we're trying to also re-engage folks on our council to join some of those committees as well. We've had many conversations about the activity, by Credit Union 1 and some of those key hangout spots and how that looks to our neighborhood and finding safe balances for the kids walking home from school. So Tasha, our vice president, has done an amazing job with some of those initiatives. And of course, our cleanup is always another area that's important. I know that our grant that we had for that is coming to an end. So the cleanup, the Mountain View cleanup takes a lot of work, and we actually start planning and fundraising earlier. So those are things that we're already considering in anticipation of the spring.
Yeah, so we do want to talk a little bit more about community safety. On the bottom of your handout.
Just a question, you mentioned Credit Union 1. Does that impact the neighborhood with them opening up there? Because before there was no banking there at all.
I think, yeah, definitely. I know, Daniel, we were just talking about them losing the Sunday hours. So I think it's nice, especially people who don't have, access to transportation, having them in the neighborhood. They do a really good job about being present in the neighborhood, whether they're, giving funding or volunteering hours. So I would say it's been great having them there. I don't know how it's going to be with Sunday closing now. That was huge.
The services were in high demand, and that was one of the priorities of the neighborhood for a long time, to be a financial banking institution in the neighborhood and not just have check cashing and pawn shops.
During the big years, we tried to get something up there. It was nice to see it finally get done. But if you guys at community council could thank the bank, give them a little made-up award or something, just so they understand how important they are to your neighborhood, because for a long time, there was no banking facility in that area.
And that's a great example of where state dollars for redevelopment have had a huge impact. That was a project where the Anchorage Community Land Trust took a contaminated piece of land, remediated it, and helped Credit Union 1 set up shop there, and that's been a real anchor of revitalization in the neighborhood.
Thanks.
And so we did also want to talk about community safety a little bit. At the bottom of your handout, this is a picture I took last week, and it's on a city easement. That's Clevin Street and Mountain View Drive, and really we've seen a lot more activity than we have in the past on that corner. I've counted 22 people there, and those are some middle schoolers walking home after school ends right past that corner.
And what's not necessarily evident from the picture is that those individuals are drinking typically, passing bottles back and forth. 20 individuals in that corner is not typical. I own property on London Street, I drive by there quite frequently. And everybody knows about the party on we've seen it shift somewhat from in front of the Credit Union down the street. And it's right across from, it's right between the two Brown Jug locations there across the street, the only package liquor stores we have in the neighborhood. The council has requested a public hearing on the removal of the two package liquor stores in the neighborhood. We passed the resolution on Monday. And just to put that on your radar, it's the third time in a row we requested a public hearing. The last time around, the Assembly only conditionally approved the licenses, but that dialogue was not complete. I'd be happy to talk about that more, perhaps in another setting, unless you're really interested in that. But public safety is a serious concern of ours, and especially when it comes to the safe walking around the school for kids in the neighborhood. We put pedestrian lighting in, spend millions of dollars on these improvements, and then we have an open issue like this. Even when we have foot patrols, the issue still exists. So perhaps those foot patrols might focus on these kind of issues. I'd be happy to get in touch with Cecily Williams, principal at Clark Middle School. She walks with these kids. She understands. She knows what they've seen. It's not pretty. She'll put it probably a little more frank terms than I will. And this setting, but, she cares about those kids and doesn't want them to have to go through some of this stuff. You know, it's a walking community, and preschools in the neighborhood, and they get kind of dog this kind of stuff on its own. So I just want to put that out there. These are municipal easements where this is happening. We have the bus stops. This is listed in private property where the private property owners adjacent can do something about it. So public safety is a high priority for us.
Appreciate that. So Mandy, that would go to you, right?
Yep, and the clerk's office received that and have begun the process for getting it to the assembly for the option to sell.
Be sure to highlight that for us, because sometimes we go through those quickly. Good.
Mandy, would you check and see if there's any ABC violations on that store? And are they selling shooters out of there?
So I actually contacted the ABC, I think it's AMCO now. Gave by phone message, didn't receive a response, and sent an email and asked if there were any violations in the last 2 years out of the stores. Was told they could not provide that, I would have to go down to their office because they're understaffed. No manuals to get it.
That all comes in our packet.
So we tried to figure out if there were any violations. The last time around there was a violation. They only do one compliance check per year on average. It's actually less than one. They have 80-something package liquor stores, and they did like 70 compliance checks in the last cycle. And they're actually down to a skeleton staff, and that's one thing. I think Sarah Oates was on maternity leave, so they have one person doing liquor. I don't think they've done a lot of compliance checks in the last 3 months.
Then I've got one community council, the problem is they're selling shooters at the store. Would you, if you get a chance, walk in there and see what the store is? They're selling shooters?
They're selling things under $10.
Things?
They're selling shooters. There's alcohol advertising in those. There are no restrictions on these liquor stores that we're aware of. I know the downtown improvement district, there are some restrictions which are specifically tailored to that area.
It would be nice to have a resolution from your community council asking this, have like, as a condition that we have it in front of us, to restrict the size of what they can sell. We've done that before.
And it's not necessarily the shooters that are always the problem. It's they're passing around decent sized bottles. And that's the stuff that doesn't go down right away, of course. They probably are using shooters as well, but bangs or black actually using larger, $10 bottles oftentimes. And they have 2 stores there that you can literally throw a tennis ball from one end to the other.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is it the hope of the community council that one of those licenses will not be renewed?
I don't know that the answer is not renewed because we don't want punitive action. We want responsible action on behalf of the operator. It's not our job to make a business decision for them, but I can't see how having 2 stores across the street from each other is an overhead efficiency. They can still have that license, which is valued at probably $40 million, located somewhere else. They could be making money in their market. Glen Square Mall, for instance. Chicago's got a license, Glen Square Mall. Even if they wanted to stay in the neighborhood, there's probably a better location for it. One of their stores is literally right across the street from Clark Middle School, and the other is across the street from that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, just to end, those are the main points we wanted to make, but we also wanted to talk about, last week we met with Fairview and talked about some of our joint priorities because our neighborhoods do have a lot of similarities in demographics and land use, and really the points for both Fairview and Mountain View that we wanted to focus on are alley paving, public safety improvements, and park improvements for our parks and rec centers. Those are high priorities for both of our neighborhoods because in our neighborhoods people use public parks. They don't leave the city to recreate. Our grid pattern streets, lots of people have driveway access and trash access on the alleys. And in both of our neighborhoods, we do have public easements and public spaces where there are safety concerns. So we just wanted to end by making those points and to thank you for your time. We do plan on doing this every year. This is how we want our neighborhood plan to be used so that we can constantly come back to the city, to the assembly, and talk about what we have accomplished and what we need help accomplishing. So we appreciate your consideration.
I know Mr. Constant's not here right now, but I have to say, I said this last year too, Mountain View always impresses me from you guys. I think this has been my favorite, and I say this being biased towards Eagle River, but this has been my favorite plan. And I think the reason this really speaks to me is the effort you guys have made for community engagement and really not just talking about land use and stuff, really looking at what the residents in their community really want to focus on, and it's reflected. And I'm impressed. So Fairview, I don't think it's making me go back. They have a high bar.
Who's that?
No.
It's a goal.
You just pressed you before I make my presentation.
No, it's
Oh,
a
that's
goal.
terrible.
It's a goal. It's a goal.
Look at that. Look at that. Dissing me already.
Not at all.
Throw you right under the bus.
Right under the bus. Come on.
Not at all.
Oh my gosh.
Not at all.
Well, I guess I'll have to fuck up. So.
And for Chris Concept, he usually comes to these meetings. He could not make it today. He really wanted to.
Well, I just wanted to give kudos to his community on his behalf, even though he's not here.
So we're gonna talk about Fairview now. Is that out?
Well, I hope so. And if, of course, Mountain View is back to follow. These guys are just kind of pretty amazing folks, and Fairview, we just struggle along, trying our best to make the Eastern Core a better place. So
You're making the violin out for you, Alan?
Huh?
I can start playing the violin for you.
If you could, that'd be great. So.
And we actually met with Alan and the Fairview folks a couple times recently when we were preparing for this meeting. And we wanted to make sure we were complimenting each other in our requests and that our plans continue to serve the need equally in our communities. We've appreciated all the work and all the help they've given us in our process. So just to kind of say that our success is in part due to theirs.
So, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak about the efforts of the Fairview neighborhood. Our neighborhood plan. As soon as the Anchorage Assembly approved the ordinance that allowed for neighborhood plans to be developed in the municipality, the Fairview Community Council was before the Assembly asking to be recognized as a sponsor. And the Fairview Neighborhood Plan is one that was initiated by the grassroots citizens. It's been driven by the grassroots citizens, been put together by the grassroots citizens, neighbors, people living in the neighborhood. It's really been, I think the neighborhood plan reflects the spirit and the soul of the people who live in the Fairview neighborhood, people who are in the neighborhood for the long haul. So, and that's one of the characteristics, I think, of the Fairview area, is that people are in it for the long haul. And so, while we have to deal with issues that are short-term, in nature, we also always have our eyes always kind of focused, 5 years, 10 years down the road, so that because unfortunately some of the challenges that we face are thorny, they're tough challenges, and it takes that type of perspective, 5 and 10 years looking out to the future, in order to really produce solutions to those thornier problems that we face. So, one of the things that we were able to do with the support of staff and it was passed around to you, is the out of our neighborhood plan we have the priorities, and I won't go through this. I'll get this to be pretty much for you to look at your leisure, but and I have to admit that all the action steps in our neighborhood plan, we haven't made action on all of them. So that's a failure on our part. But I bet you we've made action on at least 50% of them. And that's pretty good. If I was in baseball, I'd be an all-star. We would be an all-star, right? We'd be an all-star neighborhood. So with a 500 batting average.
50% of the Hall of Fame.
That's right. So actually we feel pretty good about the progress that we've made. And we've been active. We're a pretty active neighborhood. We actively participate in the process with the municipality. We're active in the update of the Anchorage Bold land use plan. Provided a lot of comments on there, making sure that it reflected our neighborhood plan, and to a great extent we were successful and integrating the goals and objectives of our neighborhood plan into the Anchorage Bowl land use plan. So one of the big things I think, and that will be, and I'm looking forward to it. It's one of those longer term projects, but it's this concept of a Fairview Greenway, and which is a connection between Chester Creek, Greenbelt, and the Ship Creek. Greenbelt along just west of English Street along. When the H2H project comes forward, we'll have the Greenway as part of that. It's included as part of the land use plan, and what that will do, it will create a pedestrian and bicycle beltway around the urban core, and provide a unique community amenity that I don't think you see any place else in America. That will stand out nationwide as a great public amenity, and really help to differentiate Anchorage from other communities in the United States. So I think that's a very positive step forward. We've been very active with the update of the Merrill Airport Master Plan, and we've been very active in working with the Anchorage Park Foundation and the Parks Department to make improvements at Fairview Lions.
Oh, yeah, I can wait until you're done with this portion of it. I have a question about highway to highway.
Okay, but with Fairview Lions and the Fairview Park. So we've had our community gardens were recently expanded at the Fairview Lions, and we've got some new playground equipment in there for the kids at Fairview Lions, which was really good. We just recently finished some refurbishing at Fairview Park, and we just had a master plan, developed, for it. There's still work that needs to be done in order to make it really a nice facility for the neighborhood. It's right in the heart of East Fairview. We do need improvements. There's other green spaces, parks and green spaces that are we need improvements on. East Chester, down by 20th. You have a lot of high density down there in South Fairview, and very poor amenities for all those people. And in the area south of 15th, between Orca and Siska down to Chester Creek Greenbelt, it really needs a master planning effort in there also. But for those, we have a lot of people in the Fairview area because we have a lot of density. It's very dense. High density R3, we have a lot of R3 and R4, and we don't have very much, green space, don't have any parks. We're on a per capita basis, we're below standards in terms of access to, parks and open space, because we're an urban neighborhood, and so it's one of the reasons why we're constantly advocating for improvements of small little lands that we do have, and to provide access to more as we can get there. So one of the things that we've also done is that we've been working hard at implementing the neighborhood plan priorities in terms of design. One of the big issues that came out of our neighborhood plan process was people said, okay, Fairview doesn't necessarily look that good. Right? Is there something we can do to improve the way it feels so that it has a better feel to it, so that people will want to live here? And so that's what we've been working on. And as part of that, we held a number of design workshops in the neighborhood. Most recent one we held in conjunction with the design weekend and with the Anchorage Museum, and we had a workshop. We had a walk tour on a Sunday morning. Had 55 people turn out for that. Walking through the neighborhood, and then in the afternoon we had a workshop down at the museum, and it was very well attended, and by some key players. So we were very pleased with the results of both of those. So we're continuing to move forward with our design efforts, and just to kind of give you a sense of that, what we do is I just pass around these, it's just to kind of give you a sense of. So this is, for example, what we'll do. This is an example of one presentation that was made, talking about design. This is part of our Fairview Design Initiative. This one's talking about density and shadow space. One of the things that folks have realized is that as density increases, heights go up, but as a sub-Arctic community, we have a real challenge. We're not addressing the shadows that are put onto the streets. While the code addresses shadows falling on adjacent residential neighborhoods, the streets, the public realm, nobody's talking about it. And that's where pedestrians, that's where people walk. That's where that's how they experience the neighborhood. And if they're constantly in shadow, particularly in our 6 months of winter, it's a very uncomfortable experience. And that's reflected in going downtown, in the urban core, central business district, walking around the Atwood building, in the wintertime. It can be a very unpleasant, experience. And it's because we don't really have that northern design, we haven't really implemented good northern design. And this is one of the things that we're trying to do in Fairview. We consider ourselves to be a winter city neighborhood, and we're consciously thinking about how do we make changes to make our part of town a more livable winter city neighborhood. And one of those things has to do with shadows, and that's kind of like what you're seeing, with this, presentation. So one of the other things that we did in order to try to get a sense from about design is that we put together a visual preference survey. A visual preference survey that pass it around just so that you guys can look at it, but just so you got to get a sense of it. And then so we pass this around, and we've got it up on the website, and so the people can look at it. And this is to kind of get feedback. It's for citizen engagement about what do they feel is appealing about the way the community looks, and what do they find unappealing. And so what we have done, we've got about 40 responses back so far, which is pretty good from a sample perspective. You just need 30 to be for the statistics to be valid. And I'll just pass around a few examples of of our results, so that you can kind of get a sense of what the people are saying in terms of what they find appealing, and what they don't find appealing. So I won't go through either both of these. I just wanted to bring them to you to let you see that we're doing a lot of work, right? We're actively engaged in reaching out to the neighborhood, getting their input as to the design, what they don't like about the way the design of the neighborhood is, and what they'd like to see the neighborhood look like in the future. And the reason why that is important is because as part of our neighborhood plan, we identified one of the more important things that we wanted to do was deal with the design. We wanted to come in with an overlay, or if that's not appropriate, a replacement in the municipal code. And where we're headed, based upon all the work that we've done to date, is we're moving forward with the development of a form-based code. And you'll be seeing that. Probably you'll start to see more discussion about it. You'll start hearing more about it over the next 6 months or so. We will. We're almost ready to have a working draft, a straw man, go out to the council, membership here. So that'll occur over this winter. And so by springtime, I think you'll start to hear more about this concept of form-based code and learn more about it and understand why it's in the best interest of our community to implement a different approach to Title 21 for our particular part of town anyway. And it's because of the underlying physical structure of our lots and the subdivisions and how they're laid out. So we've also been working with municipal staff regularly, and one of the things that we've been doing is working with the Department of Public Works and the municipal traffic engineer to help move forward signage, wayfinding signage, strengthen our sense of place for the neighborhood. That's one of the action items for our neighborhood plan, and so we are making progress on that. And so as a result of that, what we've been able to do is just kind of share these around. These are examples of what we're doing. We're coming in and we put together this packet, Places of Project packet. It's for the Fairview Gateway project, strengthening the neighborhood sense of place. What this does, it calls for the recognizing how the Fairview neighborhood plan acknowledges that there are distinct sub-areas of Fairview that have different characteristics. They feel differently. So there's a South Fairview, a West Fairview, East Fairview, North Fairview. Right? That's not all just one big sort of mass called Fairview. There's sub-areas. And so that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be recognizing the reality that West Fairview, that people who live in West Fairview, they feel a little different about their part of the community than people who live in East Fairview and the people who live below the bluff down in the South Fairview area. And so what you'll see is that we're coming up with new street signage, complementary. We're going to work with the traffic engineer. It will be, the sign shop will be producing these over the winter, and they'll probably be going up next spring. And it will have little icons, graphics to kind of help to give a visual, image of each particular area, and so people can readily identify, when they see that, image, what part of Fairview, they connect with. And so we're moving forward with the wayfinding and the street improvements, projects, and we're also moving forward with other solutions, trying to make our streets better, and that is to deal with this issue of snow removal. We've worked with one of the things that's part of our neighborhood plan. So we worked with UAA, the School of Engineering, and we got them to do a design for us for a snow melt cistern at the Fairview Recreation Center in the parking lot. We don't have funding for construction of it, but at some point it would be great if we could get funding for construction of it and to show how we can implement a different approach to neighborhood-based snow removal than the currently very expensive approach that we have, which is just plowing and and hauling it away in trucks. On that same theme, we've also are advocates for the concept of Fairview snow fighters. We've passed a resolution and we've fleshed out a program how it would work for a snow blower loan program that we'd like to see implemented, and where volunteers in the neighborhood, they would get snow blowers and in the fall, and they would plow the sidewalks and keep them clear during the winter, and then the snow blowers would be picked up in the spring. So it's that type of innovation that we are continually pushing innovation in design, innovation in providing solutions to the real problems that we face in our neighborhood, that we're working with and we're continuing to advance at the council level and by different members of our community. And so we do, I think folks in the neighborhood do a lot. We work hard on behalf of our neighborhood, and it's very positive and empowering to see folks in the neighborhood stepping forward and taking on that extra effort, not getting paid for it, on behalf of the neighborhood. So it's really good. It really builds a strong sense of connectedness in our neighborhood. One of the things that we realize though is that we can't do it all by ourselves. We really do need the support of the municipality, and we do need the support of the assembly for our efforts that we're engaged in. And this little one-pager certainly would support adding to the next road bond projects. There's just these bullets here, and that is to restore the gateway elements on 50th at Orchard Street, Anchorage. It's been in there for a while. It's starting to show wear and tear. You have a lot of people passing by it on a daily basis. As it starts to deteriorate, this natural weathering, it needs to be maintained, and because if it's not, it reflects badly upon the character of our neighborhood, and we don't want it to reflect badly on our character. And the other one is on 15th at 8th Street, the overpass there. They have these fishing poles that they used to be a very vibrant red, and they've weathered and deteriorated to the point where now they look it looks kind of seedy, and they really need to be renovated and fixed back up in order to reflect the pride that the people in the neighborhood have for our neighborhood. Also on support adding to the next road bond, streetscape improvements on 9th Avenue, east of Anchorage Street. We worked hard to get 9th Avenue changed from just a rehab project to a redesign. And but the priorities for when it came to construction, the priorities went over to the west end, the south addition, and that's okay, I guess. But the things that we advocated for, and we got included as part of initial design, and when it came time for construction, they weren't included. So now we've got on 9th Avenue, east of Ingram, you've got a lot of space that's been paved over that was originally, they're supposed to have elements, design elements. It's supposed to have a gateway element, in there. It's supposed to have, landscaping and lighting in there that matches the neighborhood, have strengthened our sense of place, and they were not included, when that project went forward through the last road bond, and it's never been picked up. And so it's really something that should be, it'd be great to have closure on the 9th Avenue project, with the inclusion of those design elements. And also, reflecting the same priorities of Mountain View is our alleys. It makes a big difference. Having our alleys paved rather than all these puddles in the springtime, and it's very unsightly, and it's and many of the residents of Fairview, a local improvement district, people just cannot afford that technique. It's really to the benefit of the community as a whole for the alleys of Fairview, to be the paved, and that's why it should be part of the road bond package. And support adding to the next park funds, implement the recommendations of the Fairview Park master plan, and and adding to the operating budget, the Parks Department funding for master planning efforts for the East Chester Park area, south of 20th and, the other green space area, and south of 15th and Chester Creek Greenbelt. And really, we really would greatly support your any efforts you can help us with the council to address, this Gamble-Ingra corridor. Right? It's kind of a blight. It's like a cleaver cutting through our neighborhood, right? We were successful in making a big difference in cleaning up when we closed down Spirits of Alaska with your help, with your support. I tell you, that's made a huge difference. The volume of disreputable street traffic, on there in that Hyder and 13th and 12th area, it dropped off significantly. When that facility was closed. And now it's been replaced by a laundromat, which is great. It's one of the things that we've always wanted, that to be able to have a laundromat, in our neighborhood. So it's very positive. So I'd like to. The last thing, I guess, is it really would encourage. One of the issues that came up during the neighborhood plan, and it's identified in a number of action items, and it's something that is very difficult to get a handle on, and that's what the social services, these support services, that we have this incredible concentration of them in the north end of our neighborhood, and while they are physically located in our neighborhood, they walk. They don't stay in our neighborhood. They walk in the urban center with all the tourists, right? They walk in the South Addition. They walk into, Midtown. They walk over into Mountain View. Right? Having all those, that concentration of all those social services, in that part of town, it's not in the best interest of this community. They need to be dispersed, and we would like to like your support for dispersal, of those. It's not going to be easy, but I think we want a more livable, city, and we want to support economic development in the tourism industry in the downtown. You really can't showcase to tourists those, that part of our community. With that, I guess our neighborhood plan, it was ambitious. I think we've done a pretty good job of moving forward with implementation. It has not set on the shelf. And we fully anticipate continuing to move forward in the future, and we're in it for the long haul, and we especially look forward to coming back at some future time to make a presentation to you guys about this form-based code. I think that once you guys see what we're coming up with, you're going to say, I think I kind of like this stuff. So we got some cool things going on in the Fairview area. We got some innovation things going on, and we got some innovative ideas. We're proposing as part of our form-based code the creation of an arena district, and to take advantage of those major regional public facilities. There's no spin-off into the of all that disposable income into the neighborhood. We don't have the supporting restaurants and pedestrian amenities that cause them to stay and linger either before or after an event. That's one of our weaknesses here. It's something that we can do to make it a positive change in economic development. And and moving forward with the H2H and with the Fairview Greenway, and some of these things are big and gnarly, type of issues. Takes time, but we're going to continue to muster on. And Yeah, Fairview, we're just a little neighborhood struggling to do our best, and certainly we're not as competent or as energetic as, the Mountain View folks, but we try. We try. Thank you very much for your time, and if I can answer your questions.
So Forrest did H2H?
I'm good.
Okay.
Alan, over the years since I've lived here, we used to go downtown to buy cars. My part of town is sucking all the car dealers from you and putting it in my area. What's gonna happen to Ninth when the Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, whatever it's pleased? Is there anything we can do to help you guys? Because I've seen car dealer after car dealer pulling out of downtown. And they're gonna be empty buildings.
Yeah, but this is great. This is a really interesting question, because normally what you would expect to happen is that, because if you look at the platted land, right, those car dealerships, they've come in and they've taken all those little 7,000 square foot lots, and over the years they've replatted it, and now you've got a big block, right? One big tract of land for the entire block, right, to reflect their operations. In an urban center, a big block, of land in an urban center, that's the type of thing that would typically, it would attract, the type of development that the planning department is trying to encourage. Mixed use, with retail on the ground floor and, office and residential, up above, because you've got enough space to do that. But the challenge is, this gets back to, you can't get market rate development into this particular part of town. Because one, there's inadequate public amenities, right? Because market rate, condos and housing, they're gonna wanna see amenities. That's what the Fairview Greenway does. It provides an important greenway to support that type of development. And two, you gotta do something about the concentration of all those support services, in that part of town, because people who want to have a development in those lots, those plots of land are being vacated by the auto dealerships, right? It's going to take money, and that means you're going to have market rate and above prices, and those individuals are not going to want to have a street experience where they run into inebriates, on a regular daily basis. It's just not going to. You won't be able to get that investment, that's needed in that part of town.
I just view it as another death knell for Fairview. This tries so desperately to stay alive, but if that building goes blank, that block goes, I just wonder what's going to be moving in there. Another support network or what?
Well, what we see happening is, this is a reality, is driven by economics, is that social service agencies, they're on tight budgets, and so they're going towards wherever the rents are cheapest, and it's kind of like a continuing cycle.
So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, is because the rents are cheapest over in the Fairview area, so let's locate there. And the reason is, well, wait a second, how could you've got the ball rolling towards creating a slum, in our town, and if you let it roll, keep rolling down this hill, and you don't want to create a slum. You have to shift the ball. Let's stop the ball from rolling down that hill.
Okay, just like you said, so we've got not a whole lot of time left. I want to make sure we have community land trust is a bullet. We already covered that.
Yes.
Okay. So, Christine, any comments?
So, just to get back to Mr. Trainey's question, a couple of things can happen. So, what the AEDC Good Work Play has been proposing is to develop some kind of a tax incentive toolbox that developers could come in and use. We have been working on that now for about 4 years. And we still don't have a toolbox in place. We don't have TIF. The deteriorated properties ordinance is hard to use. And so, and this area in Fairview has already been designated as a deteriorated property area. So, you know, the things that we can do to help Fairview redevelop is to get some kind of incentive package in place, you know, a bunch of different incentives that folks can use. And then the other thing is when, Alan didn't mention, but we actually sat next to Mark Lucan, who's the commissioner for DOT at the design workshop at the museum. And Mark wants to know that the assembly, that the community is in support of bringing H2H back. And I think that Christopher is working on that, you know, what are the concepts gonna be on that, and that kind of thing. And so that would help Fairview too, because then we would have some reality of what is DOT gonna do there, what as a community do we wanna have do there. And whether that be a cut and cover or something like that, that would definitely help to bring Fairview back. You know, there's empty buildings around town here. There's one over here on Tudor that's been for sale, that was the Alaska Club. Could that be a nice housing workplace for, and social service place? I mean, the building's for sale. It's been for sale for almost 2 years. So, you know, there's things that the assembly, I think, can do to really help the Fairview area, to really help Mountain View. They've articulated that today, and
Yeah,
I'm
just-
sorry, I got on my soapbox.
Well, I can just follow up real quickly on that, and that is, the H2H, it provides a great deal of uncertainty for investment now, because you don't have certainty on the alignment. You don't know which properties are going to be taken, right? So you need to resolve that uncertainty. And an investor is not going to come in and risk, you know, tens of millions of dollars when there's uncertainty. And right now, that big mega project creates a lot of uncertainty. So you need progress on it. Now, one of the ways that we can achieve progress is by, and it's something that's recommended in our neighborhood plan, is with the municipality to enter a memorandum of agreement with DOT, right? Where the municipality is said, look, this is going to be a cut and cover. This is going to be covered over. The municipality wants responsibility for those, what's going on over those covers. We want to be able to have structures on those covers, and then because that having that MOA in place and then working on redevelopment, what that area would look like, right? With those redevelopment on those covers. You know, particularly like with the Fairview, the Greenway concept, as an anchor public amenity along there, and with our Gamble Street as a main street, mixed use, two-way street, because you moved all the regional traffic on below. Now, and with the arena district, now all of a sudden, you've got this part of town that it's an attractor. It's becoming a place where people want to invest versus some, place where you get all this disinvestment. And so, yeah, moving forward with the highway to highway project is a big deal. And this memorandum of agreement between the municipality and DOT as a first step makes a lot of sense. And
Thank you.
If I could make one point,
Sure.
Mr. Trainee, through the chair. I think additionally, in both the story of redevelopment in Mountain View and speaking to the powers that the assembly has and the mayor has in the municipality, lest we not neglect ACDA. ACDA is a redevelopment tool in the tool belt of the city, which was obviously an effective tool in redeveloping Glen Square Mall, which was a large contaminated tract of land in the heart of Mountain View. Similarly with Fairview, the city does have the ability to obtain site control on large lots, and those sites along 9th Avenue, the former spaces of the automobile, or excuse me, the auto why am I not thinking this word?
Auto dealerships?
Yeah, the auto dealerships, excuse me. The city can have a play in that, and obviously there's a lot to consider with that, but one of the goals of the Fairview plan is housing, and not just supportive housing, but affordable housing. Fairview is a desirable spot to build housing to serve the workforce needs of downtown. So I just wanted to remind the Assembly of the power of ACDA potentially being influential in Fairview and in other redevelopment strategies.
You know, we're also doing the MTP 2040, and that's a place for a lot of these things. Chris was on the PC, I'm quiet about these things.
Yeah, that's a long-term vision document, and what's needed is short-term action steps. So,
And we're also doing the TIP.
Yes.
So, okay, Daniel, yeah.
I just want to take the opportunity before it's, I said, to acknowledge the folks that we have here. We have quite an entourage for this presentation. I wanted to first thank Christine, Joni, and John for their time working with us and creating the plans. They become basically a member of our community's family in this process, and we appreciate their time. I also, if I could acknowledge, we have Dave Barney from the Boys and Girls Club. He's the Mountain Center director. If he's got something he wants to add, I think this might be a chance for him to be resource members here. I also wanted to acknowledge Jason Bookman, who was recently our council president, and along with Jasmine Smith, who's our current president. We have new people coming in leadership positions from the neighborhood, residents who are very talented and taking their time because the pay is, well, it's not great. And then finally, if I could make one change to our plan today, I would probably go back to the introductory letter that I wrote on the very first page and name every single member of the Anchorage Community Land Trust by name. I regret not having done that before. If I could take everyone who's worked for the last 5 years and thank them personally, I would, because I mean, they got the whole entourage here today, and they do this every single time we have something to do with Mountain View. They come out in force. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
You know, one thing that Alan presented here, and this is some, we talk about Anchorage's goal of building up, not out, and then they're screaming, but don't cast shadows. So how do you do that? And I appreciate this presentation here where, okay, you got shadows, deal with it, and different tools for dealing with that. And I think that form-based code kind of feeds into that. Because that's really important. That you're building tall, you're going to build shadows. How do we deal with that without saying build tall but only 1 story tall?
yeah.
So that's a nice presentation.
Yeah, well, I just want to say, I don't think you're too hard on yourself, because that was a very good presentation. The thing that I really like, not everybody can be Mountain View, I realize that, but the thing I really like is when I see community plans that reflect the community and the unique focuses of those communities. So for me, with, part of my world was a criminal justice background, and what I see you saying is 2 things. Number 1 is we really want to see the development reflect the individual characteristics of each part of Fairview. I love that. Because when you start, it's kind of like the broken windows theory, when you start investing in your community and getting that emotional attachment and calling them out, you start to see pride, and you start to see the community flourish, and you start to see crime go away, frankly. So I think that's brilliant. And your focus on innovation, especially, it really piqued my curiosity, because we've talked about it before with the snow melting versus snow hauling. And those are the kinds of things, I mean, that's something, that innovation piece I've not seen in other plans. And I think both of those things are super crucial. And you said maybe only 50% of your stuff you achieved or started to achieve. I think that's a huge accomplishment, and you should be proud of it. So I really, it's exciting to me when I see actual plans reflect the individuality of each part of the city. Good job.
Thank you very much. I won't try to be as good as Mountain View.
Well, like I said.
We'll keep struggling.
It's nice to be the standard on something. I appreciate that. Do that a lot more often.
Is there anything else? Anyone who came, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. If you got anything to add?
Just, if anyone, we talked about a lot of things in Mountain View and Fairview, and if anyone hasn't seen them, I know both of our communities would be glad to have you come visit and take you on a tour and drive you past Davis Park or 9th Avenue or the Boys and Girls Club and have you visit those things. So please let us know if you have questions or want to come to see our communities with us.
I guess I do have one little thing that I think unifies both concepts that were kind of touched on, but I think it's kind of important that we talked about in our joint executive meeting, and that was making sure that there's a sense of support from the assembly that reflects the efforts that each individual neighborhood is putting through and helping us maintain the momentum in a positive direction. We had a lot of wonderful momentum 10 years ago in Mountain View, and it sort of carried us to this sort of point, and I think we both neighborhoods sort of feel like we're at this point where we need another little push. And another thing is, you know, as we're dealing with some of these crime issues and people with issues that cause them to be visually inebriated and that kind of thing. Perception of our neighborhoods is really key, and having a perception that the assembly supports and is giving us energy to improve is really important to make sure that those buildings don't stay empty, that the vacant lots in our neighborhood don't stay empty, because you know, those of us that live in these neighborhoods, it's amazing how much feedback we get from our other community members that don't live in our neighborhoods, that we're crazy for living in our neighborhoods, that it is a place that is not a good place to be. And you know, that's not our perception because we're part of the community, but we need that support from the municipality and the assembly so that we can help share the positive things of our neighborhood. I guess that's what I want.
Thank you. Anything else?
One quick thing, Mr. Chair. We all noticed that the building is gone in Midtown, and I was just wondering if anybody had thanked Fangs for tearing it down.
I did.
Okay.
That's a thought, yeah.
Saw him yesterday.
Okay. I thought that would be important.
Email me in a draft.
Okay.
It was all done by private enterprise, and they had a heavy load to try and get all that asbestos out of it. They did a remarkable job.
Yeah.
Amy?
I think I saw Mr. Trainee doing a happy dance when that building was on. I may have seen that.
One less eyesore for Anchorage.
But, you know, there's another thing that I want to mention, because Alan mentioned it, and I think absolutely it's something that has contributed to, frankly, the problem or the perception in Fairview, which is the incredible high density of social services in their neighborhood. And you know, just to be completely frank with you, you're going to have a major lift to try to disperse those throughout the city, because I can tell you nobody wants them in their district. Now, from an Eagle River perspective, I want to tell you we've already started doing our part. Our community overwhelmingly supported a new treatment facility that's in Acuna, and it was a partnership. There was not one community council that did not support that project. There were a lot of questions. There were concerns, but through community discussions and dialogues, our community overwhelmingly supported it. But you know, it depends on the size of the project, what the project is, where the project's going. But this is one of the biggest challenges Fairview is going to face, is other communities being willing to accept it. We saw, I think it was your district, maybe it was West Anchorage, but there was a discussion of putting a facility, you know, in a different part of town, and almost 300 people showed up and said, oh hell no, not in our neighborhood.
Well, you're kind of the one off of Raspberry.
Yeah. And so that's you know, there has to, whenever we have those ideas, the very first thing that has to happen is there has to be community engagement, education, discussion, and mitigate the concerns of the neighbors, because it is going to be very difficult. But I agree with you. The more you contribute to Fairview, the more you contribute to that area. Frankly, you're feeding the problem, I think, because it's just the nature of the beast in some respects. But it doesn't mean we can't tackle it together. And you know, I have been a vocal supporter of the downtown number for a long time, simply because they're one. And I want you to know that there are communities that do support that mission of trying to alleviate your burden.
Just offhand, no South Anchorage Community Council opposed the included facility.
I was gonna say, it was in my neighborhood, and we all very well overwhelmingly
Up
supported
near
it.
a lake, I think. Alan, you know, you've got Brother Francis, I've got Rescue Mission. I think this next one needs to be south of, I don't know, Diamond. To be
There are
effective.
places south.
His area.
You know, an issue though, it is, if you disperse the services, then you make it harder for people who don't have good mobility to access them. So you make it less efficient. And certainly in South Anchorage, we don't even have buses anymore, so.
Eagle River either.
Right.
See, then we'll have a demand for a bus in your area. We need to get you a social service
I might do it,
agency.
you know, so I mean, we certainly, I mean, there are places that make sense, you know, but if you make the solution less efficient, then what we do is we guarantee for longer we have this continued problem. It's just less visible when we spread it out.
Yeah. In America's past, in the early part of the 20th century, the urban areas were inundated, with ragamuffins, orphans. Right? They were everywhere, and they were causing.
Did you say ragamuffins?
Yeah, ragamuffins.
What do you use?
My dad used to call me that all the time.
Oh, is that right? No, but they were, there were lots of accidents in the industrial age, and parents, a lot more illness, and so you had a lot more orphans.
Children were expected.
And what happened? One of the solutions was to say, hey, look, how are we going to deal with all these members of our society that are a burden on us? And that's when they created, they stepped up and they created a special place, right, a community for them. It was Boys Town, and I would suggest that here in Anchorage, you look at creating a special place, for those members of our community that have a very difficult time coping, with modern society, and we give them, maybe a village environment, in a remote part of the municipality, where the services can be aggregated and congregated, and we can give them a full service, but they're not placed right in the urban core where there's sensory overload and where they become prey to predators, in the urban environment, and I would just like to suggest that we haven't really talked about that, but I think we should give serious consideration to that.
We have actually had some discussions about specifically homeless veterans, and in our community, especially in Acuna, they've talked for the last many years about creating basically a vet village where they can have treatment options, they can also have job training skills, they can have, and so this is something our community has actually been looking at, trying to see if there's a way we can incorporate it, and granted it's with veterans, but at the same point, that concept has been something that we haven't shied away from, so you're not the only one thinking of it.
Well, that's good, and I would suggest that even a conversation with the Pedestrian, because a lot of.
Oh, they've been part of the community.
Well, because a lot of the individuals accessing the services are Alaska Native, and Acuna could.
And Acuna was part of the treatment center that was actually.
Oh, good. So they're right there.
Yeah.
So they're actually maybe moving in that direction.
Yep, they are.
Yeah, good.
Okay, we're gonna wrap up, Daniel, and
Just very quickly, it's a timely discussion because my understanding is the proposal for the budget includes an additional $500,000 for homeless services for an unspecified project. 2 years ago, when the mayor took office, the first thing he did was dedicate $200,000 of funding, and then we ended up with Sickle Manor, which is from the second one. That's 56 beds. First, $500,000 is earmarked in the budget to start to know, and I've asked 3 assembly members to know what those things for. So it sounds like there's another housing project of some kind coming forward, and to my knowledge, there have been no community meetings on this, just like the last year, no community meetings on what was announced. So this is a timely discussion that we should have about where and when we talk about all the services in there, most of them are nonprofits, you don't have a say over them. But the housing that the city funds and purchases and supports, you have a say on. So this is particularly timely.
Yeah, we would not want to see Black Angus Inn become, another facility.
So super fun cleanup site one day. but you know the problems there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and not to get off subject, but I just want to make sure everyone saw in this paper, the last couple of pages, there's some examples of how to create designs that don't have quite as many shadows for taller buildings, and I thought that actually was a good idea, and want to make sure everyone saw those. Because we are going to be redeveloping and building higher, so these are the kind of things that we're going to have to start considering.
Very good. Thank you.